The Galactic Union had a rule. Only the strong survive. For eons, we traveled the stars, conquering worlds with primitive species. When our scouts found Earth, they laughed. A small blue planet divided by borders, fighting amongst themselves. They had no shields, no plasma cannons, and no unified command. To us, they weren't a threat. They were a resource. We called them the soft ones. We thought the conquest would take 3 solar days. We were wrong. It has been 3 years, and we are still dying. I was there when the first mothership entered their atmosphere over a city they called New York. We didn't send a message. We didn't ask for surrender. We simply opened fire. We watched from our monitors as their tall glass towers crumbled. We expected them to scream. We expected their leaders to beg for mercy. But as the smoke cleared, something strange happened. The humans didn't run away. They ran into the fire. While our drones searched for targets, we saw tiny figures pulling others from the rubble. They weren't soldiers. They were civilians. They had no weapons, yet they looked at our ships with eyes full of a cold, dark promise. Our scanners showed their heart rates. They weren't slowing down in fear. They were accelerating in adrenaline. So we landed our ground troops, thousands of armored warriors 10 feet tall with skin like steel. We marched into their streets, expecting a ghost town. Instead, we found silence, a heavy, terrifying silence. And then, from the shadows of a ruined building, we heard a sound that haunted our dreams. A human whistling a slow, defiant tune. They weren't hiding. They were waiting for us. The scouting party never returned. 100 elite warriors, the pride of the Galactic Vanguard, vanished into the concrete canyons of a city without a single tank. We waited for the sounds of a formal surrender. We waited for their leaders to crawl. But all we got was silence. We sent our high-altitude drones, thinking the humans were hiding in bunkers. But the cameras saw nothing but shadows and ruins. Then, the first video feed came through from a fallen soldier's helmet. It wasn't a battlefield. It was a slaughterhouse. Our warriors were being picked off, one by ghosts in hoodies and torn jeans. They didn't have shields. They didn't have plasma cannons. They had something much worse. They had nothing to lose. They didn't fight like honorable soldiers. They used primitive fire. Molotov cocktails made from scavenged petrol and dirty rags. They didn't use cloaking devices like we do. They used the darkness of their own sewers, moving like rats through the pipes, appearing behind us when we least expected it. One of our captured officers managed to send a final shaky transmission before his signal was cut forever. His voice was trembling, a sound we had never heard from our own kind. He said, "General, they aren't fighting to defend their borders. They aren't fighting for land. They are fighting to make us suffer." We grew angry. We increased the orbital bombardment until the very air turned to glass. We leveled entire provinces, turning their homes into dust. But every time the smoke cleared, every single time, the humans were still there. They were digging themselves out of the rubble with bleeding fingernails. They were rebuilding their snipers' nests in the skeletons of burnt buildings. And they were smirking at our ships. They weren't afraid of death anymore. They had invited death to dinner. They have a word for this kind of war. Guerrilla. A slow, painful crawl through the mud and blood. We have a word for it, too. Hell. We realized then, with a cold shiver in our hearts, that conquering Earth was the easy part. But owning Earth, that was an impossible dream. The prey had become the predator. We thought we were fighting a broken species. We thought their silence was defeat. We were wrong. Their silence was preparation. While we watched the surface, the humans were busy in the deep. In underground bunkers and hidden laboratories, they weren't just surviving. They were learning. They took our fallen drones. They stripped our captured plasma rifles. They hacked into our encrypted data streams with their primitive but brilliant silicon brains. And then, the night of the red moon came. For the first time in 3 years, our scanners detected a massive energy spike. It wasn't from our ships. It was from the ground. Suddenly, our orbital shields were bypassed by a virus they had engineered from our own code. Our motherships began to flicker. Our weapon systems jammed. Then came the sound. A sound that shouldn't exist on a primitive planet. The roar of human jet engines. But they weren't burning fuel anymore. They were burning our plasma. Thousands of modified human fighter jets rose from the smoke of their ruined cities. They didn't look like toys anymore. They looked like vengeance. I saw it with my own eyes. A human pilot screaming a war cry into his radio, slamming his ship directly into our command cruiser. They didn't care about their lives. They only cared about our destruction. We realized too late. We hadn't invaded a planet. We had kicked a hornet's nest. And now, the hornets had stolen our stings. The hunter has officially become the prey. We fled. For the first time in our history, the Great Union was in retreat. We thought if we left their atmosphere, we would be safe in the cold vacuum of space. We were wrong again. They didn't just kick us off their planet. They followed us. Using the warp drives they ripped from our burning wreckage, the humans built a fleet of their own. They didn't name their ships after gods or stars. They named them after the cities we had destroyed. The London, the Tokyo, the Karachi, and the New York. When they arrived at our home world, they didn't send a message of peace. They didn't ask for an apology. They simply opened a wideband transmission that played on every screen of our empire. It was the sound of a human heartbeat, steady, loud, and unbreakable. Our council begged for a ceasefire, but the humans only had one reply. You started this. We are finishing it. As their boots landed on our sacred soil, we realized the ultimate truth about humanity. They are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. But they are the most dangerous thing in the multiverse, because they never, ever give up. Earth is no longer a resource. It is a warning. To any empire looking at the stars, if you see a small blue planet, turn around. Because if you wake the giant, you will not live to see the dawn. For more HFY stories, subscribe HFY Legends. Also, don't forget to share with your friends.